Good afternoon. Welcome to the UK Deaf Leadership Summit webinar. And this has been our series. My name is Craig Crowley, and I will be talking to a very special guest by the name of Sofiya, which is a particular name sign. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much. It is a great honor to be invited here. I am looking forward to having this conversation with you. But just to give you some background, the UK Deaf Leadership Summit webinar series has been ongoing, and we have interviewed a range of guests, which have been incredible. And at the same time, having Sofiya come along is great. But just to give you a bit of her background, she is the first deaf barrister at law in Ireland, which is incredible. So to see the background is within the four courts in Dublin, just to see sizes. So to think that there's a first deaf professional, and in terms of what she is wearing, she is actually in between court work, hence seeing her in her work uniform. Sofiya, again, thank you so much for being here. I am delighted to have this conversation with you. Okay, so we're going to chat for an hour. We're going to have a question answer type process. We aim to finish just before 2 p.m. So I would like to start with a question, an easy question to start with. Sofiya, can you tell us about your family background, your growing up experiences? Tell us a little bit more. Okay, then. I grew up in Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, and it was in the south. It's in the second biggest city called Plovdiv, and it has its own particular name sign. So that's where I grew up. It is a beautiful city. Grew up there. In terms of the family dynamics, it's quite a mixture between my parents. On my father's side, they're all hearing, there are no deaf. On my mother's side, there is deafness in the genealogy on the mother's side. So my mother is hearing. Her mother is my grandmother, is a coda, so a child of deaf adults. Now, my great-grandmother and great-grandfather are both deaf. Both went to a private deaf schools back at that time. They were fluent sign language users. So I acquired sign language as a baby. Okay, so you're actually bilingual, aren't you? So it's already innate in you, coming from your parents' background. Wow, that's pretty incredible. Now, what was it like for you growing up as a deaf child? What was life like for you? Pretty tough, but at the same time enjoyable. Within the family, there were differing perspectives. My twin brother and I, oh, so you're a part of a twin. Yes, 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 yes. Deaf or hearing? Yes, deaf. Oh, wow. So the both of you are deaf? Yes. So in terms of our education and the why and the how was pretty incredible. But my parents decided that they wanted me to be within a mainstream hearing school. At that time, it was the end of the communist era and becoming a democracy at that time. So there was a need for us to be able to fit in with, and at the time there was no interpreting services or anything like that. And my parents wanted to ensure the best education for the two of us. The deaf school was still using the oral system, and my parents didn't want that because they already had prior knowledge of it. So we were sent to mainstream schools. So that's how I grew up, in two worlds to say, sign language at the home and within the hearing world, lip reading, how to speak, So I feel now that I can navigate both worlds. Craig? I think that is actually interesting because so many others would have gone through the mainstream process, some would have gone to deaf school. So the fact that you were in mainstream with a deaf background, a deaf family background, so you're having that experience of the culture within the family and then being communicating differently, facing the challenges of communication within education. So this leads to my next question. So you grew up in a mainstream world, but what ambition, aspirations did you have when we were young as a teenager? And what made you become more determined? When I was growing up, it was tough at school. I had to adapt my personality and how I was to navigate my life, how to make new friends. But thanks to my family, I was able to do that. Particularly my mother and my grandmother were very insistent that I study at home because at school, because there's no interpreter, I wasn't understanding and they didn't leave me aside. So I just tried to lip read, copy notes from my friends at school. But then when I went home, I would have to study. I would have to read. They would tell me, what is it that you have learned? But I didn't want to have anything to do with that, but they were very insistent in it. But it's the reading that would have helped me to learn, to understand, know more about the world, know more about everything that I needed to study. And I have now got a love of reading. I love reading books. I was also involved in sports. And with sports, I learned how to be on time, how to be a part of a team. So it was the sports element that also helped my personality to navigate my time as a young person. Also involved in painting with so many other things of interest. But what was most impactful was the final year, which would be the 12th grade. In Ireland, that would be an equivalent. So it's the final year. It's the 6th year in Ireland. Would you have the same in England? But it's the final year. Ours would be year 11 equivalent that we're looking at here. So yes, we needed to undertake an exam to complete, my education. And in Bulgaria, they were mandatory subjects and there were also optional subjects. So I chose English as well as my brother chose English, but the government said we cannot because there was 4 elements, 4 categories to that particular exam. One was written comprehension, to speak English, to hear and to write, and an essay, to write an essay. And they said no to us because it didn't fit with their system and they felt that there was too much work to add to make any accommodations for myself and my brother because it never happened before. But it was frustrating because I had studied for 2 years prior, learning another language. It was another language, it was a different language and it was tough. So I had prepared, and then to have them say no a few months before the exam. And no, are you saying a month before the exam? Yeah. And I just went, no. My family fought that answer. And that made me more determined, made me want to fight, made me understand that you should not give up. And many of my friends had thought, but why are you fighting? It's not going to be possible to change. And I'm saying, no, 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 it can be done, it can be done. And that made me realize that I was self-empowering, that I can change things. And that's how I became, I grew because of that time. Craig, that is very interesting how you were inspired growing up and then to come to the time of the exam that you were not allowed to do so because of the different criteria in English. So your parents supporting you through this as well is really interesting. Now, before I ask about you becoming a barrister and the law, and so I will go back to those questions, but based on what it is that you're talking about, and here we're talking about language, out of interest, how many languages do you have? So you have Bulgarian Sign Language, which is your home language. What are your other? You also mentioned English. What other languages do you have? Growing up, my first language is Bulgarian Sign Language from the time that I was born. Also written Bulgarian, of course. Those were the two most important foundational languages. So once I had those, it was much easier to learn other languages. Research has proven the need for foundational languages. Then I moved to America for a year, and then at school there. So I learned American Sign Language, ASL, and that was the first time where I was able to be taught in sign language. It was a gobsmack moment to think that I had missed out on so much before that experience. Looking back at all of my years when my hearing friends were all laughing and chatting, I missed out on all of that. But that 1 year made me realize that. Another language is, I've also got Russian written language. That was a mandatory subject at school. English, and also I now have Irish Sign Language. I've also learned some BSL because I do have friends in BSL, so I can understand what you're saying, what you're signing, but not so much being able to respond back in BSL. And also had the opportunity of being at the EUD in Belgium as well. So you have learned a lot on your journey so far. And based on what you're saying in terms of research shows that learning sign language first through childhood is essential. There is proven research, and I do agree with you, whereby there are some deaf people out there that learn the language later in life, maybe at 10 or 15 years old, but it's your growing up years. It is essential that you do have sign language as your primary language. All of that is good. So that's part of your journey. So moving on, can you share with us how you aspired and became a barrister at law? What was that journey like? How did you navigate all of that to get to where you are now? Okay, so the journey to now started way back, long time. Way back then, like I had previously said to you, I faced barriers regarding the English exam. The Ministry of Education sent a letter to apologize because we had said, if you do not allow us to do English, it's direct discrimination. So I was allowed entry into doing that exam. And with the fourth element, my written English was at its highest level. Then I want to go to university again, face discrimination. They said you can't do law because you're deaf. It's too difficult, but you know, how would you be able to catch up? All of that was said to me. I did another subject in the meantime at university, but then I went to the European Union of the Deaf. And when they announced their first internship, 4-month duration, and I was interviewed by Mark Whitley. I was so incredibly nervous back then, but I got the opportunity to work with EUD, and it was there that impacted me even more because I saw sight of deaf lawyers. They told me about their stories. They talked about deaf in the army in Israel, that there were doctors, fully qualified doctors out there. And all I thought was like, wow, wow, and wow. Then I was involved in the work of policies and legals within the EUD, having all of those types of conversation, bearing witness to deaf professionals doing this type of work. And I wanted to be the same. That was my inspiration. That was my starting point. So when I went back home, I told my mother and my family that I want to leave Bulgaria, to leave my family. I mean, leaving behind the food, the weather, the culture, and all of that, because the entry into university in Ireland was easier. So that's when I made my decision to go to Ireland. There was two options, Russia and Ireland, so I chose Ireland. No, it wasn't Russia, I'm so sorry. It was the UK. In Ireland, I have to say I experienced the biggest changes. Sorry to interrupt you there, Sofiya, but you had to do a lot of soul searching, a lot of thinking to leave your home, to leave your family, to leave Bulgaria, to move to another country, and to make that decision about your future career to become a barrister. How incredibly challenging that is. And that meant you also experienced discrimination, not being allowed to do exams. But you were the one that were breaking down all of those barriers, which were not at all easy. Now, how many years did it take you to become a barrister at law? In total, it's taken me 11 years. And the reason for that is because the university here, you had to look at the issue of funding, which is a long story in itself. It is so expensive here. I was working full time, extensive study. You can look at all of the books behind me, extensive study required. And I wanted to be fully committed to getting this barrister at law because this is the highest standard. You're talking about at a 2.1 level. Anything lower than that, you cannot gain entry. And it is a very, very competitive domain to enter into. I did take a year to go back home to work with the embassy in Sofia. And then I returned back to Ireland to study. Yes, I do remember that. You working in an embassy. So that was also part of your job. I remember reading about that in some deaf news somewhere. Was that a good experience? Yes, it was. It was very influential and it made me more understanding of what it is that's needed. So then it was looking at company law and the commercial department within the UK, and I was heavily involved in that. So I already had work experience that also, and that helped me with my further studies as well. I had the opportunity to learn, to study, and have work experience within the legal domain because of the embassy work. And I also must say that, yes, it did take a long time, but looking at the first year, I did not understand or know Irish Sign Language. There was an interpreter present, signing away, who also was struggling because was unaware of the legal subject. The interpreter didn't know, I didn't know. So after the first year, I approached support services and said I needed access to a full-time note taker because of the standard of English that was required, because the interpreter wasn't understanding. I needed to follow what was being said, and it was very complicated. And that first year, I passed my exams. In the second year, I was able to learn more ISL because I had acquired deaf friends, and I was more comfortable with the use of ISL. But interpreters do need training, I will have to say, and that is also another big challenge Craig, now talking about interpreters, you're right. Not all interpreters would need to have an understanding of differing specialist subjects. But in your case, you're obviously facing that challenge because you've already had that experience. So your standard is high, needed to be high, but interpreters had to aspire to that as well. You're not the only one, but any deaf person within any profession will struggle with, I'm not saying all, but it is out there where there are interpreters that do struggle. And there are many deaf people in business, in different types, in different professions that can empathize with what it is that you're just saying. Now, there are some really amazing, fantastic interpreters out there, to be fair. But this particular area, this specialist area, I would assume can be a crazy type of challenge to be faced. So again, going back to your fascinating journey so far. So now, here you are, a barrister at law in your uniform, in the background of the law library. Is it at all possible that you could share with your everyday work? What do you do? Would you be able to do that? Okay. So first of all, as barristers, we are self-employed. We are not part of a company, self-employed. That means that all of us are here to acquire work from our solicitors. It is the solicitors that give us work on behalf of their clients. So a client would contact a solicitor and then would contact me to represent their client in court. That's how our system works here. So solicitors can be part of a company, but barristers do not. In terms of my everyday work, it is very varied. I am in my first year, something similar to what you have in the UK. You've got your pupillage years. Pupillage is what's used in the UK, but it's called the first year of learning. So something similar to probation, yes. I work with an experienced barrister who is now in practice for the past 20 years. So their clients and their cases are required to go to court, and I am there to shadow how they work, how to plan, how to create bullet points about what it is that they need to say. And I am learning a lot from that particular master, and also given the work of doing drafting of differing types of legal documents, provide an legal opinion, legal research of other cases that would be related to particular clients. And I do stand up in court and represent, because there are times when my master is not available. So I get the opportunity to stand up in court on my master's behalf, but every day is different. Now, that makes me want to ask another question. This is really, really interesting, looking at how you work. Now, do you belong to a law firm, or like, are you truly self-employed? Self-employed. So effectively, this is your own business. Yes? I am self-employed. I work for myself. Just like any other person out there who is self-employed. I don't know if that applies to the UK as well. No, it's very different. I know that in the UK it's somewhat more complicated, but all barristers in Ireland are self-employed and not with any firm. But there is consultation right now about working in partnership with solicitors to ensure more consistency in work opportunities. But traditionally, all barristers self-employed. Okay, so another question. So you receive work from a solicitor. Do you do defense or prosecution? I can do either. On any area of the law, any area of the law. Recently, I acquired 3 of my own clients. The first client is in relation to property and mortgage, housing payments. So there's an issue around that. So I have made representations for that client, still ongoing. The second client is in the area of defamation. There's a particular sign that we use for that, but it's defamation of a person's character, a big case that is ongoing. And recently, it's the issue of immigration. So those are my 3 cases so far. And it means that I work on my own, but the congeniality between barristers here is incredible. We can support each other. And if I am unsure about something, I can ask a colleague, they will share their work with me. And truly, truly fantastic, positive environment to be in, and incredibly supportive. And it fascinates me completely. This is so very interesting in what you have to say on the different types of work that you're doing. So you're talking about company law, financial law, human rights. It's a human rights issue, equality. Would that be right? All of these differing specialisms. I am very comfortable with all of those different domains because I have previously worked as an intern within a law firm, particularly during the summertime when I was studying. So there's a lot of companies out there that provide that opportunity to do internships. And there's so much work that can be done within that. But I am also interested in the area of human rights, particularly being a deaf person. And it's very easy for me to represent all types of groupings and minority groupings. But I have to say, I love my work. Well, I can clearly see that. And like you said earlier, it's very competitive field to be in as a barrister. Now, as a solicitor, they get to choose which barrister, and barristers then proceed with the work that they're given on behalf of a solicitor. But then to be able to have that conversation with your colleagues, with other barristers. But going back to you, Sofiya, as a deaf professional within the area of law. Now, there are many, no, hang on, now did I think of it? We do have a deaf solicitor, but in terms of a barrister, I think you are rare to be deaf and to be a barrister. Can you tell me what your feelings are in being a deaf barrister? Do you feel that it is important to encourage other deaf to pursue this line of work? It is so incredibly important that deaf people do. Yes, there are significant challenges. Yes, there are difficulties to be faced. But there's a few things that I would like to say to this. I am self-employed here in Ireland, so I pay. So if there's no work, there's no money. If I do have work, I get paid. So there is a risk at play. That's the first thing. That applies to the hearing professionals as well. Then to look at me as a deaf professional, I am a full sign language user, which means that interpreters will always have to be paid. And I am very grateful to the Irish Deaf Society and the community for advocating. The deaf community in Ireland have advocated to the government for many years to have the Irish Sign Language Act enacted, to have that recognition that Irish Sign Language is its own language, that all public bodies must provide interpretation for anybody who requires it. Without that piece of law, I don't think I would be practicing as a barrister. Maybe there would be another way that's more complicated, but having that piece of law states that very clearly. So I'm very grateful for the Irish Deaf community for doing that. And this is all about the collective working for decades that the deaf community undertook. And I'm hoping that my work will be impactful for the deaf population in the future. And I would love to see more deaf barristers come into the profession. What you've had to say here is a really important statement. You're right. With regard to Irish Sign Language Act and having that official recognition, which meant that the doors were open to opportunities. But what was also important here is the issue of equality. It enabled you to become a barrister, but without the Act, it would have become more challenging. You would not have been more successful. Now, maybe I would have eventually got there, but it would have been more complicated. I would have to fight differently, maybe would have to go to court. It would have been more complicated, more difficult. And when I look back at my journey, there were many times that I wanted to give up. Many times I wanted to give up, because even to study, it was a 2-year part-time course during COVID with a full-time job. Sometimes it felt excessive. I had enough. Watching sign language, watching the interpreters on the screen, some were good, some were very tiring, because having to interpret very heavy subjects all day long. But one thing has stuck to the back of my mind is that I felt a responsibility that if I gave up, then other deaf people were saying, well, it can't be done. So I felt a duty, an obligation, and the need to say, yes, I can do this. And I am truly, truly, truly delighted that I made it. Craig, looking at your journey obviously was not easy. No, it was. I can absolutely know it wasn't. But what made you not give up? What made you you? What? Now, of course, and many of us have gone through the process of, I want to give up, but then change your mind and then stay. But what made you so determined? Is it that deaf passion, wanting other deaf people to have that same opportunity? And, you know, you having to face all of those barriers and challenge those barriers, absolutely right. And, you know, going through the different parts of my life and the experiences, like at school, I couldn't be bothered, but my family were very insistent that I stay, and I learned how to be persistent. I started to be something. It was the case, once you start something, you must finish it. My family taught me that you cannot just give up. You must make the decision about what it is that you want to do, be clear about it. Now, sometimes you can say, well, it's just not worth it. But in terms of really important decisions, it's important to not give up because it's difficult. If it's difficult, it means that you are on the right path. You are out of your comfort zone. That type of anxiety means that you will succeed. And I always think like that. When I'm fearful of something, and if I'm unsure, it means that I am doing the right thing. So that's how I have persisted. Okay, so you have a strong ethic, is what I can see. And I will use the word ethics in different ways. You had it from the time within your family, which obviously helps, but you also have that type of character, a character of, I would call it a steely character, very determined. You did not give up. Now, obviously, yes, through time, there were moments that you felt like you wanted to give up, but what you've had to say is just so incredible. Now, you are in the legal profession. What does it feel to you? What message are you giving out to deaf people out there? Because if there are deaf people that are interested in the law, what advice and guidance would you give to those that have that interest, that motivation, that passion, that aspiration to get involved in the law? Can you share some of that with us? First of all, if you're interested in the area of law, you must love law. You must have a passion for law, first and foremost. Secondly, be persistent. Persistent and consistent. That is an absolute must for this type of work. The study of law is not easy. You need to be more patient, particularly with the people that are around you that do not think that you can succeed. You have to put those types of thoughts to the side. Be patient with interpreters. Now, interpreters are lovely people, but they need to be encouraged to understand, because there's information in class, information in the future, so you have to be patient. You also have to believe yourself that you can, because when you have that belief, you're already halfway there, because you know what it is that you want. Very, very positive wording here. Very powerful words of wisdom, I have to say. Like, it's giving other people that interest and that passion. And looking at your current position now as barrister, you are the only deaf person. Now, what about barristers with other disabilities, those who are blind, who are wheelchair users? And that would relate to the question of EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion, EDI. Do you think that within the legal profession and within the courts that EDI needs to be improved upon, or is it doing good? What's the situation of the EDI in Ireland? Okay, well, oh my word, I can talk about that issue alone all day. Yes, there is room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. Every day, times are changing, technology is changing. There's always room for improvement, but always consult with us. I feel very strongly about that, because to date, there's very little consultation with those populations that have been marginalized. And I feel lucky and fortunate in that there are people out there that are open, that want to ensure that I feel welcomed into the profession, to feel part of this profession, which I do. But there are people out there and people with disabilities that, you know, will always be competitive. To be self-employed is not easy, so there are many that do leave the bar, which is very unfortunate. Now, if hearing professionals leave the profession, it means that people with disabilities are at more risk of leaving the profession. Take, for example, there was a blind barrister who left the bar, which I think was deeply unfortunate. Hopefully we'll come back into the profession at some point in the future. Do you know the reason why? We don't know. We don't know the full reasoning why. But you know, we don't have different types of representation within the profession, and it clearly can be seen. It's a very male-dominated profession that you can see with your own eyes. There are improvements, but there is more work that needs to be done. And for me, I'm Eastern European, I'm deaf, I'm a woman, so I've got a multi-layered approach to oppression. I have to work even harder to show that I can do it. Now, all I can say is that there is a lot of room for improvement. If you look at the courtroom, there is one woman who has a wheelchair and will be entering into the profession in 2 years' time. And what we work within is are old buildings, and those buildings are of heritage value that cannot be adapted. So what about accessibility for that particular student? And we are working together as colleagues, because that colleague deserves that support, going to meetings to talk about accessibility, and also the use of remote remote court. It focuses mainly on sound. So if there's any type of sound within a room, the camera will navigate towards that, and I am unable to see the interpreter on screen. So there's different types and different aspects of the work that needs to be improved upon. But they do provide interpreters, they do provide funding. So I have my communication access needs being met. All of us together are ensuring that we do and can support each other, to be strong in our support of each other, to remain solid with each other, and that there is a need that something must be done. Okay, so you have interpreters working for you. I'm assuming that you would have a team of interpreters, or do you have the same 2, 3 interpreters? How do you work with interpreters? At the moment, it is not perfect, but I organize all of the bookings of interpreters myself. I do not rely on agencies anymore because it's too slow. The process is too slow. And in terms of selection, I want to choose the particular interpreters that can do certain areas of work. So I organize the booking of interpreters. I do have a team of 6, 7 interpreters, 1 or 2 that are for remote hearings. The others is based on their own individual availability. But I do have 2 regular interpreters that help a lot. And I don't need to explain as much because they know. But if you've got a new interpreter coming in, I have to reassure them, saying, yes, this can be done. They have their own anxieties to deal with. But no interpreters have legal background, so they go straight into court and speak as a barrister, which is not the same as a deaf person being a suspect or a witness in court. My standard is completely different. That is required. Consistency means, consisting of interpreters means that the interpreters learn faster and quicker. Craig, but as a barrister, you would be very busy, but you still have to book interpreters yourself. That's crazy. Yes, additional responsibilities, yes. And I'm sure that there are other deaf professionals out there that feel the same as you. Now, to have agencies are fine. Sometimes they can be good, but there are occasions when interpreters are coming through agencies that are not quite what we need. And we as deaf professionals have preferred interpreters, and our preferred interpreters are not always available as they were 10 years ago. It is more and more difficult to get your preferred interpreters because they are committed elsewhere. So for you to have to book your interpreters to do court work is a crazy challenge. Yes, it is. But I hope that will improve for you at some stage. Now, maybe in the UK, in the UK, you do have access to work. So you as deaf professionals also have to book your own interpreters, don't you? It varies. Oh, no. There's a whole diversity of need. We have no access to work here in Ireland. But I had thought that with the access to work, you would have more availability of interpreters here in the UK. We have a lot to learn from the UK here in Ireland. Yes, in the UK, we do have our access to work scheme. The access to work scheme has been a lifesaver because it meets with our employment needs, but there are other challenges. One is the costing of interpreters don't match with the rate that we are offered through access to work, and makes it harder for deaf professionals to be able to employ interpreters. 10 years ago, not a problem at all. But the access to work fee has been capped. We do face other challenges, and we do have interpreters, but please believe me that us as deaf professionals do face challenges. But in your case, in Ireland, to not have access to work, yes, government is funding your work or the interpreter's work because it's a legal requirement, which is a good thing. Now, within court, it's within the courtroom that I have an interpreter in the courtroom to communicate with the judge in the building. That is covered by the law. But when I do consultation with clients, it's separate. It is separate. So how do you cover those costs? Well, the Bar of Ireland in my first year are covering that cost. And at the moment, they are looking at the costings for the second year and saying that I would need to fund the interpreters myself. This is something that I do not wish to do. Other colleagues can proceed without that concern. How would I be able to do that? I believe that to be oppressive in some. So next week there is a meeting with the Bar of Ireland to look at how we can resolve this particular issue. Okay, so you operate as a deaf professional, but it's double the workload. So yes, you work as a barrister, that is your profession, but then you have to look at the issues of accessibility, interpreter support, communication support, yes, and the booking of interpreters. Don't forget that. So the administration. Oh, yes, you're absolutely right. Of course, the additional administration that you have to incur. Yes. And in relation to that, just a quick question. So when you bring on board interpreters, are they remote, 2D or 3D in person, or has to be in person? I've tried to do it remote, but only for things like an application, removing a case. A few seconds, yes, remotely. That's easy enough to do. But there are the technical issues at play that cause undue frustrations. But all of my interpreters are in person, but it's also about being able to network with my colleagues. And I focus on my work here. So interpreters for me are best to have in person. So yes, you're obviously in court. You have the barrister network that you would need within the law library where you are right now. And I can see that as being essential. Do you know what? I agree with you. I think we could talk all day, but I'm sure that there are a few questions coming in that people in the audience will want to ask you. But there is one final question. So looking at your crazy, inspiring journey. I'm really enjoying this conversation with you. But I wonder, with the audience, looking at you in terms of your passion, your aspirations for other deaf people within the league. Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier, but what area of the legal profession do you think deaf people should aspire towards? Is there any particular domain in the area of law? Because the law is quite expensive. Where do you think deaf people should go now? It's up to the individual. It's the individual preference. If you enjoy working in this area, it will be a great job for life. But if it's something that is not inspiring you, it won't be a job. For deaf people, they have a life. There are problems. There are issues of human rights. There is oppression. There is discrimination. There is, employment issues. There is unfairness that exists. All of that is at play. But it's about what it is that you want to do, that you can do. In the areas of law, you could do so much. Insurance, property, there's so many different areas of the law. There is no one place that deaf people should be. It's not being deaf, I don't think, is a disability. I think it's up to deaf people to have an open choice in choosing what they want to do, choosing what they want to focus upon. In the UK, we do have deaf solicitors. They are professionals within the legal system, and they are very important role models, just as much as you are a very important role model to all of us. Is there, for me, I'm looking at you and I'm looking at steely determination that represents you. You refused to give up. You wanted to give up, but at the back of your mind, you had that steely determination not to give up. And you're right. About representation. You're a woman, you're from Bulgaria, well, Eastern European, the sign languages, you're deaf, you have a multi-layered representation, and you are presenting this case of equality for all. And are you saying that within your profession, the majority of your barrister colleagues are male? Yes, well, the majority are. So you need to have a strong personality within that. So you are breaking down so many barristers. You have broken through that glass ceiling. Now, I do see one question pop up, and it's in relation to your family. What happens to your brother? What's his journey? Where's he at? Okay, my brother remained in Bulgaria. He is interested in construction work. Ah, okay. And he is also self-employed, does not want to work for company. And I think the two of us have been strongly influenced by our great grandparents. Both of them had their own businesses. My great grandparents, my great grandmother had her own particular name sign. She was a tailor. She had her own company. And, you know, she would be requested to make whatever. And they had their, but at the end of the day, they had their own business. And they would tell us countless stories that we enjoyed. And it was a case of, well, if they can, we can. So I think my brother and I have been strongly influenced by them. Okay, how interesting to see your individual. Oh no, we are very, very different. But similar determination, steely determination, that element can't be changed. That clearly comes from your family. Now, looking at the chat, you work as a barrister at law. Do you have any future aspirations within your line of work? So you're a barrister at law. What are you going to do next? Yes? But what are you expecting to do going forward? Do you have any other aspirations? So yes, you are now a barrister, but is there anything else that you want to achieve? I want to remain within this line of work as a barrister. I want to create more awareness out there, influence policy, influence change. I do feel a sense of responsibility in encouraging the younger generation to believe in themselves, not just in the area of law, but you know, to be a solicitor, to do policy work, that anything that you choose to do is possible. So I do feel that sense of obligation to carry that piece of work to carry on. There is a project in the making, but more news about that later. And also looking at the area of law, sign language and the law. I'm looking forward to exploring those a little bit. There's a lot more. There's a lot that I want to do. And I also work as a volunteer. I'm on the board of the Irish Deaf Society, which means that there is other work that I am also doing. So looking forward to doing so much more. Craig? So looking at the words that describe you, steely determination, but you can see that you are the person that will not give up. Absolutely not. You have that passion. You want to contribute. And you are in the Irish legal system, which I think is a fantastic achievement. I'm sure that in the UK, you're now possibly influencing others. Now, you know that in the UK, we have the BSL Act that is just at its starting stages. We're taking the baby steps in the past 18 months with the BSL Act, but your act is very different to the ISL Act. Your act has opened doors, but I'm sure that there's additional policy work that needs to be done to ensure that the ISL Act is stronger for the deaf community, particularly its sign language users. So when you say that you're continuing work in that area, it does make sense. The fact that you're working as a board member on the Irish Deaf Society is really exciting. I think there's just one more question here, just a moment. And this will have to be the final question. You spoke about having projects that are happening. Now, there's a question here that's saying, do you believe there could be 5-10 Sofias? Oh, that is my dream. I want to see more. To do it on my own. I rely on interpreters for sign language communication, but I would welcome a lot more. It would be my dream to see that happen in the future. So it's an absolute yes for me to see more of me. I think we now need to bring this to a close. Is there any final words from you, Sofiya? Again, do not be afraid to make that jump out of your comfort zone. It's easy to stay in your comfort zone. Change will not happen if you do not something. If you feel it in your gut, if you feel it, go and do it. Do not be afraid. Beautiful wording to bring this. Do not be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. You're absolutely right. I can completely engage with that. Sofiya, thank you so much for a fantastic, fascinating conversation on your journey, how you've navigated that journey to becoming a barrister. I believe that Ireland are very fortunate to have you within their legal system, extremely fortunate. And I am sure that there are other countries, such as the UK, that are rather envious of you being deaf within the legal system. So you are posing a challenge out there. And like you said, do not be afraid of new challenges. I can completely engage with that. Again, thank you so much, Sofiya. Thank you, thank you. Absolutely wonderful. I'm so delighted to have had you here with us today. I think we now need to bring this to a close. I would like to thank all of you in the audience for watching today. I hope you enjoyed Sofiya's journey, bringing it to a close. Now, the next Leadership Summit webinar series will be revealed in due course and this will be undertaken again in the autumn. Sofiya, again, thank you. And also to thank the interpreter that's been in the background translating everything into English. For now, bye-bye.